And thank you for inviting me. Feels very loud up here. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't ever know whether it's best or worst to go last. But I think in this case, it's been such a congruent set of speeches this morning that I really look forward to being the last and kind of being able to build on what everybody has said. There'll be some overlap. By this time, I think there always is. But hopefully it also moves into a new direction. So I want to just take a minute, even though we've done, probably everybody has done this, to look at demographic profiles. I've really picked France because I do a lot of work there, and Greece because we are here. And I just want to show the same thing that everybody else has shown, except I want you to concentrate on one thing. So this is France in 1950. It looks like kind of what we think of as a demographic period. Pyramid, this is 1975. You can see the rectangularization, 2000, 2025, and 2050, the projections. I want you to pay attention to the fertility at the very, very bottom. It's about 2.6% for fertility in this group. And I don't want to talk about fertility a lot, but I do want you to think about why do we have low fertility? Do we have low fertility because we have aging societies? Is it something about work? Is it interconnected? So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind. And then, of course, we'll look at Greece. This is 1950, 75. You see much kind of the same pyramid changing into a rectangularization. You can see the low fertility there, low fertility in 2050. It's somewhat lower than France at 2.1, and often now it's below replacement in many countries. So that kind of sets the scene for thinking about aging societies, that it's both, and this is what others have said, it's both the fact that everybody is living, that many people are living longer, life expectancy has improved, but what sets this pyramid or rectangular in shape also has a lot to do with what's at the bottom at younger ages and low fertility, and that contributes very mightily to this. The other thing that's really important that people haven't focused on is that the rate at which we get to be an aging society is enormously variable. France, for instance, has had about 100 years to get to this place. Sweden has gotten a very long time, US. Then you see Japan has gotten this way in almost no time. And of course, all the Southeast Asian countries have had almost no time to adapt. And countries that have 100 years, France and Germany are really two of the prime examples. Sweden have a lot of time to think about what's happening, how are the institutions going to adapt to do something. Countries that face this in a 20 or 30 year period, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to figure out what the optimal situation is. The other thing I want to show you is that the blue line is basically all the OECD countries and life expectancy during that time for men and women. The United States is way off this curve. I do this to show you that I'm not going to give you the solution. I think we are part of the problem. And part of the reason that I come here is to learn like what everybody else is doing better, that we can really learn to adapt, because the United States in terms of life expectancy is, now 47th ranked in, a list of 60 or 70 countries. And clearly there's a problem that's going on in America. It's what motivates my work around work, I want to say, during this time. The other reason is I'm an epidemiologist, not an economist, so I am very interested in health as the outcome. What produces healthy longevity? What produces good aging? My theory is that it actually has a lot to do with the economic and social and welfare institutions that societies have, and the working ones. And so this dynamic that we see where health drives good economic outcomes is a double directional, bidirectional sort of outcome. Very important to remember that the same factors that you see as outcomes probably predict health as well. And as somebody who's been working on social determinants of health, I'm very interested in how these institutional factors actually play in to produce health. That we don't produce health, I don't think, we only produce health at the margin in terms of our health systems. Very good at cure, as we've been saying before, terrible at prevention, not designed really for prevention at all. However, if we think about prevention, it's some of these social and economic institutions that are the major drivers of prevention. And so we need to focus on this bidirectionality much, much more. So what I want you to think about now, and people have alluded to this all the way along, thinking about aging societies in addition to aging individuals. It's not about what makes you healthy, it's what makes aging societies healthy. What is going to make aging societies healthy? I want to say it's imagining an entirely new normal. I think David had set this up really well. What we need to do is leave behind the age-structured buckets that we realize are really no longer functional. And there are probably 3 of them. I'm mostly going to talk about rethinking work and retirement. But, when we design major institutions in most societies, we decide education happens early in life, although probably none of you finished your education when you were 22, maybe 35, or maybe there are 40-year-olds. But, you did education in the middle. Then you had this crazy period of working like crazy and having a family. And then you had this other period that is this very ill-defined retirement period, which now could span 30 years. Nobody ever thought of living 30 years in this other state. And for anybody who's in the middle now, you'll know that is so hard to keep up. And so the idea is, what if we just let it go? These buckets are no longer functional. The way we designed institutions when we had a pyramid and when you received retirement for a couple of years is one thing. It's not where we are today. And so education needs to be lifelong. There isn't anybody, whether you're a car mechanic or a doctor or a lawyer or an economist, who doesn't believe and learn that lifelong learning has to keep going on. And letting go of that little bucket for when you thought you knew everything at 22 or 25 or 30, whatever it was, is not really functional. It doesn't help you in your job, and it doesn't help you really to work longer. The same thing about rethinking social connections and family. A lot of the work that we do is on caregiving and social support and networks. All of that changes if fertility is low, if people live longer, if people get divorced, if they have complicated families, if they move back and forth geographically. So we need to rethink that. But mostly what I'm going to talk about is rethinking work and retirement. So I was part of a Sloan Foundation group of all economists, actually, where we thought about working longer in relationship to retirement. It was all about how we were going to secure Social Security, much in the way David had talked about it, like the institution is worth saving. I don't know about the people, we just have to get there because we have to save Social Security. And at the very end of it, somebody said, actually it was David Wise, what about all the people who we aren't counting? What about all the people? You look at employment rates often. Employment rates only represent people, at least in the United States, who are looking for jobs, who want to keep thinking of themselves as employment statistics. What about all the people who fall off before? And suddenly we reframed the question. And so this is what we did from the Health and Retirement Survey. You've seen some of these. These are US employment rates across the life course. And what you see is this enormous fall off between 50 and 60 that almost everybody has pointed out. And really, all I want to point out is that it's different for men and women. Women have a different slope and then work more. The fall off is about the same. And the fall off among people with less than high school is enormous and gets down to very low levels when you look at the slopes. But the fall off among college graduates, if you look at, I don't have a pointer on this. If you look at men, college graduates, the very top one, and you see the fall off, it's pretty steep. It's pretty steep, for everybody. So the period that we're most interested in, and maybe it's even a decade before, is this period. So of these people, if we look at the people who were employed between 51 and 61, 51 and 61, among those who were steadily employed in their 50s, they're really good. That's about 52% of the group. 34% of the group in the United States are intermittently employed, and about 15% are never employed. But here's the impact. 80% of the steadily employed people, which is still only 50%, right, can work between 62 and 66. Of the intermittent employment, it's not nobody, but it's 35%. And of course, if you never work in your 50s, you have very small odds of working later. So there's no sense increasing the retirement age or thinking about the retirement age if you've already lost people. You've already lost, 80, it's 80% of the 50% who are working. So the big thing that we have to think about if we think about working longer is how come these people are not in the labor force? Like, how even are they supporting themselves during this time? And this is a pretty big mystery. So I want to say, as an epidemiologist and in public health, I totally assumed that health was the driver for why you dropped out of the workforce. I was, completely committed to looking at this hypothesis. And actually, Berkman's data yesterday was really interesting. You used some of the same data that we are of showing the importance of worker health. And I want to say worker health is really important, but it is not the most important thing. It's hard to kind of quantify these three things ranking against each other, but working conditions turned out to be incredibly important. People who had precarious work, who had no work flexibility, who were low-wage workers, people who had to commute long distance, working conditions played an enormous role in this equation of dropping out. And the third one was the work-family interface. And I want to say we often think of this in terms of young children. It's not really young children among this group. It's older. It's their partners and spouses and their parents, and aunts and uncles. It's not, so focusing only on like parental leave does not solve the problem, especially in a low fertility setting. It's a much bigger problem. So these are the three things that really that we've found so far that accounted for that. So I want to show you some of the constellations. These are some of our data that look at labor force participation and what are kind of work-family strains do they predict mortality risk. So this is complicated. It's just got a lot of numbers. But it's the adjusted associations between family status and job control and mortality among women in the Health and Retirement Survey. So in the blue, for instance, is an average married mother who could have high control, medium control, low control. The average mother in a high control setting is the reference group. You can see low control, even among a married mom, is associated with an increased mortality risk. If you look at single mothers, and with low job control, it's almost double. So you put this family constellation into a precarious work setting, and the mortality rate is really high. And you can see the same thing for a single mother who actually had children earlier. That's what that means. And long-term married mothers and later married mothers. I would say that the optimal group was to have a child, to be a married mom, have a child somewhat later, and be in a high-control job. That's kind of the sweet spot, which many of us may be in, but not everybody, clearly. The other thing that I want to show you, and I hardly ever talk about happiness, mostly I talk about health, but I thought this was great, and it was also a study of OECD countries. So this is the effect of parenthood on happiness. And here are the countries where being a parent makes you happy, is associated positively with happiness. And on the other side, you see the negative ones are being a parent is negatively associated with happiness. Well, being in France, people are happy mothers, happy parents, I should say. It's actually mothers and fathers, it's parents. And you can see Portugal, Hungary, Spain, Norway, Sweden, France, Finland, all have positive associations with being a parent and being happy. And the UK, Greece, Ireland, and the United States have this very interesting distinction of being associated with unhappiness. So parents in these countries are less likely to be happy than non-parents. And part of the idea was to look at a comprehensive policy index that included work time flexibility, parental control, a whole set of parental leave, a whole set of things. And in low comprehensive policy index countries, non-parents were happier, parents were less happy. Interestingly, in high comprehensive policy index countries, both are happy. Parents and non-parents are happy. And here's just an example that looks at, this is the top one is child care cost. So it's child care cost, the dotted line is non-parents, the solid line is parents. So parents become less happy as child care cost increases, and so do non-parents, by the way, just not very strongly. And here is vacation and sick leave, where you see actually this crossover. Everybody is better off with increased sick leave and parent and vacation. So now we come to a question. I've taken you along this path that I would say it goes from descriptive to kind of causal, semi-quasi-experimental studies looking at policies without strong causal inference, to something that has a stronger causal inference about whether you can modify the work environment and produce better health outcomes. And in this study, we actually had a very, very large study. It was Work, Family, and Health Network. We did a randomized field control study of 2 industries. We looked at a group of studies that were in the IT industry and 30 long-term care settings. And we randomized the work groups, and half of them got the intervention, half of them were the control groups. We did a lot of health assessments beforehand and afterwards. I'll tell you a little bit about what the health assessment was. And I think it's important because it's a kind of proof of principle that can you change the work environment and improve health in some way? So not a policy experiment, but a very well-controlled clinical trial. And this is what we did. We trained supervisors to be more attuned to work-family balance and issues of equity and fairness. Often supervisors kind of dole out goodies, depending on whether they think you're deserving or you worked hard. Actually, it's a right, that family leave, unpaid leave in the United States is a law. Nobody understood it was a law. So we trained people to really understand how to do this with some set of equity and fairness. And then we formed employee and supervisor group team meetings to develop approaches to scheduling work practices and increase voice. So the employer and the group together came up with their own individual kind of way of being more flexible. I led the nursing home one. In the nursing home one, the policy was that we were told that it had to be safe for patients, it had to be cost neutral, like we're not giving them more benefits, and it had to be legal, like we couldn't just do anything. Nursing homes have huge regulatory kind of things, how many people have to be on the floor, how long you can work, that kind of thing. So it had to fall under all of those constraints. Here are the 2 industries, and I want to show you what it did to IT workers, where we had more stronger effects. So it increased job satisfaction. We actually measured sleep duration with actigraphy monitors, watches. It increased the sense of having enough time. It increased schedule control, increased supervisor support for family life, adolescents' time with parents, and adolescents' handling of everyday stressors. It decreased burnout, stress, distress, work-family conflicts, plans to leave the company, which obviously made the company very happy, voluntary exits in terms of turnover, and cardiometabolic risk. Now I'm going to show you one last slide that's on the cardiometabolic risk. This is whether this is about a study that we just actually finished on these same data, looking at workplace practices in early and mid-adulthood and whether they would be associated with the development of cardiometabolic risk. So everybody in our cohort had a very large profile of cardiometabolic risk taken biologically. We took their blood pressure, we did finger sticks for glycosylated hemoglobin, we looked at cholesterol, we looked at smoking patterns there, we measured their weight. So all really biologically measured cardiometabolic risk. And here is the result. Now the result, this is a hard slide to read because it shows that basically among people who had some cardiometabolic risk, among mostly older people in their mid-40s to 50s, the intervention reduced the rate of cardiometabolic risk. So the way I say it in words is that it made you age, instead of being like 50, it made you age at the rate of a 40-year-old. That is about the thing. Everybody's cardiometabolic risk goes up in time, but the people who had cardiometabolic risk at baseline actually had a bigger effect on the intervention. Or the intervention had a bigger effect on them. So in fact, you can change workplace practices, and it can lead to reductions in cardiometabolic rate. It actually slows what we would call the rate of aging, equivalent to about a decade. It's not a trivial effect. So in terms of proof of principle, you can actually do this. So I want to just conclude with 3 principles. Social inequalities across education and gender and work and retirement are large. You can see them, but problems are widespread. Solutions need to be widespread too. One of the things that we could come back to perhaps in the discussion is the need for heterogeneity. That there's a lot of heterogeneity in these findings. It may be that different people or different working groups need to do different things. Working longer starts younger than we think. Policies to encourage delayed retirement need to address workers' need decades before traditional pension eligibility ages. Dealing with people who are in their 60s, it's like it's too late to really change that curve. So much action has happened kind of in midlife. And finally, policies affecting work and policies affecting retirement are 2 sides of the same coin. You can't delay retirement if you don't have a job to retire from. And often, at least in the United States, the people who look at retirement policies and Social Security are one set of economists, and the people who look at labor policies are labor policies, and it's not like they talk to each other. And it wasn't until the end of this whole process that people started to really engage and understand that these 2 things are just the flip sides of the same coin. So thank you.